Once there was a fisherman, a lonely man who lived on a cold and rocky coast, and was never able to convince any woman to come away and live in that forbidding place with him. He loved the sea more than any person, and so was never able to take a wife. For women see what is in men's hearts more clearly than men would wish. But though he loved the freezing spray on his face and the sight of the rolling clouds on the horizon, he still wished for somebody to love. One evening, after a long day, he pulled up his net and found a woman in it. Something like a woman, anyway, with black hair and eyes as gray as a stormy sea and a gleaming fish's tail. He was sorry that she was caught, and told her so, though the storm in her eyes rolled into his heart. She stopped her thrashing and crashing at his voice, though she did not understand his words. The fisherman loosed her, and she dove back into the water the way a wild thing returns to a wild place, and he watched her go. But her eyes had seen inside him the way that women's eyes do, and his loneliness snaked into her, and she was sorry for it. For that loneliness caught her more surely than the net. She swam away from his boat as fast as she could, and she felt his loneliness trailing between them like a cord. She did not want his feelings to bind her, to pull her back to him, so her tail flashed silver in the water, and her eyes looked straight before her and never behind. But though she didn't look back, she felt him watching, and she remembered the shape of his boat and the rocky curve of the land not too far off, and the lines around his eyes that were as dark as the deep sea under the moon. She remembered, and so she returned again to watch him. She was called a name that meant, in her own tongue, breaking the surface of the sea. When she was born, she'd come in a great hurry, much sooner than all of her 6 older sisters and brothers. The attendant who'd aided her mother had been astonished when she tried to swim away before the cord that bound her to her mother was cut. Her mother and father and siblings spent most of her childhood trying to find her, for she was never where she ought to be. She was warned repeatedly of the dangers of the surface, and of the men who cast nets there, and of their cruelty to the denizens of the ocean. They should never have told her, for in the telling she wanted to know more, and wanting to know more led her farther and farther afield. Her home was deep in the ocean, far away from the land that pushed up against the water on either side, and this was because her people feared the men with their hooks and their nets, and the boats that floated on the surface of the waves as if by magic. The storytellers told of silver fins caught by cruel metal and dragged to the decks of ships, where blood ran red and spilled back into the water, calling things that swam the ocean in search of dying creatures. Sometimes there was a storm, and that storm would batter a ship to pieces, and the men would fall into the water and sink to the bottom. The lucky ones, that is. The unlucky ones were devoured by roaming hunters with their silver-gray bodies and black eyes and white teeth. When the ships were sunk, the mermaid would go to the wreckage and explore, and pick up odd things that humans used, and wonder about them. And then one of her brothers or her parents would find her, and she would be chided for her foolishness and dragged home by her wrist, staring with longing over her shoulder all the while. One day she was swimming near the surface, far too near the surface, her family would have said, and saw a large ship of a sort she had never seen before. On the prow of the ship, she saw a strange thing. It looked like her, like a mermaid, but frozen and sealed to the ship. She swam alongside the ship for a long time, trying to see how the sailors had bound this mermaid to their craft. It was not easy, for the proximity of the ship necessitated keeping out of sight of the sailors. She would break the surface to catch a glimpse of the other mermaid, and then would be forced to plunge below the water again before she was spotted.